Hello and welcome to the Transfer Flow, and on today's episode, we tackle Liverpool's big summer rebuild. Can they get a backup for Mo Salah? How could they replace Darwin Núñez? How do they make do without Trent Alexander-Arnold? We bring you our answers to all these questions and more. That's all on today's episode of the Transfer Flow. So obviously Liverpool are approaching this summer's rebuild off the back of a fairly successful season, a season in which they won the title, were also able or willing to re-sign Virgil van Dijk and Mo Salah for a couple of years. Trent is going, but we kind of knew that all along, and certainly Liverpool will have known that for some time. So they've had time to plan for this. Where should we start with this? Should we talk about their needs? Do you want to talk about the Van Dijk or Salah deals? I don't know if you've got a perspective on those.
So I'm sure that Liverpool fans will be entirely chilled and laid back about whatever we have to say there, because why wouldn't they? Much like I was joking about the fact that Arne Slot seems to have killed Darwin Núñez and his crazy shot generation, chaotic elements, and people were like, "What are you talking? We won a title! I can't believe that you're even bringing this up." Like, first of all, it's a bit. Second of all, they did lower the price on him because people are looking at that like, "Ooh, yeah, he's definitely surplus goods, and also he isn't doing all the things that we really loved about him before." But I think that it's probably useful for people who are seeing us unusually. So there might be a lot of Liverpool fans who are coming in for the first time to frame this as why would people even listen to us discuss Liverpool? And the funny thing is, back in 2014 and 15, I was kind of predicting Liverpool moves ahead of time publicly on the internet, and it kept happening because we were using very similar frameworks in looking for players, and that led me to sort of making friendships with some of the people that were behind the Brain Trust. StatsBomb sold to Liverpool for years. I'm not saying that I know anything as an insider knowledge, but we had quite a bit of overlap in what we were doing, and Liverpool consistently have shown that they're invested in the stats side of things, with Michael Edwards coming back into the frame, with them sort of hiring Richard Hughes to oversee the Liverpool side of it. Will Spearman is still there as the director of research. He took over from Ian Graham, who left. So the point is, they probably have a lot of the same names and the same opinions about players as we might have. And in some cases, we want to talk about a lot of different types of players around their needs, but also in running a team, they have very similar sort of strategies as to how to do this as I would. And we have talked about this a number of times, including as a contrast to Manchester United. So we look at Liverpool and say they just don't make big mistakes. They'll take shots occasionally, and they'll try reclamation projects. So Chiesa is a reclamation project. He didn't cost them a ton of money. They thought that he might have a big hit if they could sort of fix some of his injury proneness. If they could bring him back to full fitness, that's a cheap top tier Champions League player that they could return to the fold. He hasn't worked out, but they minimized their losses on that, and presumably he'll move back to Italy at some point if his body cooperates. They did it with elite players sort of at the back end of their contracts as well. So they were looking at someone like Kimmich so that they could bring on board. Who's the dude that was injury prone out of Barcelona that played midfield for them?
Thiago.
Yeah. So they brought in somebody like Thiago at the back end of his career, hoping that he could stack up to a bunch of different minutes and versatility roles. They will take chances like that are relatively low risk. Minamino is another one where they're like, okay, we think that his profile looks good, but there's uncertainty about it. As long as we don't overpay for him, we could potentially just move him on, sell him elsewhere if he doesn't work out. If he does, he can at least be a role player. These are the types of things that they will do over and over and over again in their squad building. Now, the reason why we're here is because there was a lot of cruft in the later years of the Klopp era that would not necessarily have been how they ran that team if Edwards and co had been on top of it. So you basically have 2 years of time where it was being sort of pushed forward from this guy that was not in the same philosophy. They had some level of success, but it wasn't the same as they had before. And so now when they look at it, in a very surprising way, you have a league winner that needs a lot of turnover and a lot of rebuilding in order to build back into a dynasty, which is what they actually want to do. And that's what Liverpool fans want to see too. They don't want the occasional league win. They want 4 and 5 year periods where they are one of the 2 best teams in the world, and they're going to pick up many different types of trophies.
Yeah. And I mean, the simple fact is that even extending these deals for Van Dijk and Salah, like the next years are going to have some pain in them. The squad is in a difficult spot. There are relatively few kind of PK superstars here, though there are a lot of useful PK players. And our rebuild today, it's kind of got to go back to front. Like there really isn't a spot here that remains untouched. They've gone and secured their goalkeeper. And in midfield, they've got a ton of stuff. The midfield is pretty exciting. I still think there are some profiles missing there, but it's not hard to look at McAllister, Curtis Jones, Szoboszlai, these kind of guys, and say, okay, well, this is a really good core. What they're going to need, of course, is to find not only the squad players to round it out, where they previously got a lot of value from your Milners and Matips, all these kind of guys, but they're also going to need to find the special source on top because they've clearly decided that Nunez is not going to be it. Diaz is approaching his 30s. Salah, even if Salah's great next year, he's probably not going to be greatest season in the history of the Premier League great. And guys like Jota, who at one point looked like he was going to be really, really special, has just had the injury problems that have kind of curtailed that. So they're going to need to find that difference maker as well as generally filling out the squad and dealing with some of the holes that they've developed.
That attack is aggressively creeping up on post-peak. If everybody were to replicate Salah's discipline and his body and his ability to be injury-free, that might be magic, but in almost no circumstances does that actually happen, which is why Salah is so unusual. I had somebody ask me online, if you don't follow us on Twitter or Blue Sky, like I do put out pretty regular content there, and sometimes it's like asking questions, sometimes it's about the gambling side of stuff and finding interesting trends, and then sometimes it's about asking people for feedback, like what do they want to see on the show. I had somebody ask me to sort of address the signings of Salah and Virgil van Dijk as, is this a good idea? And the person that was most valuable out of that lot is probably Trent, just because of the career longevity and the unusualness of his profile. Now Salah's unusual and an attacker and a left footer, so that's even more so. But he's only got like probably 2 years left where he's performing at even a very high level. Even then, you don't know. So Trent decided to leave because he wanted to pursue new things. And it's so funny to read the media like, they were laid on trying to negotiate with him. They're like trying to pin blame on something. At the end of the day, this comes down to the player. The player was going to get paid. He knows that he could stay there. It's his home. He's been there forever. And do I just want to go on and try myself out in new places and new challenges or not? Do I want slightly better weather? Probably. Why not? And so I think that when you look at Trent, like that ship sailed, that's fine. Impossible profile to replace, which we'll talk about when we get into the specific targets. Salah, you're basically giving an extra 2 years of time to the best attacker that you've ever had and hoping that he continues to replicate. It's going to be expensive. If something goes wrong, you just eat it. It's just the way of it. The thing that I think is most important, though, is Van Dijk and his health, and knowing that Liverpool won a title because their center backs were basically freaks. I watched them in person a couple times this year. I could not believe the physicality and the mistake-free football that they were able to play at the back with the center backs. Now, they were dealing with the dying, well, I don't want to say he's dying, but like Robbo was not anywhere. Like the left back position was a huge issue this year. And you always have Trent with his issues on going forward. So like, your center backs have to be great. Gravenberch was almost a miracle. Nobody knew that he could really play that profile. So when you look at all of the above, Van Dijk was super important. Salah, they're just trying to maintain for another year. Now, can Virgil stay healthy for the next couple of years? Many 30-year-old men cannot, 30-plus-year-old. But if you looked at the most difficult spots to replace, they think they actually got the two that were most important for them, because they look at the fullback market right now. When I was looking at the fullback market, I'm like, there's some pretty interesting stuff out there and it's not crazy expensive. So I think that they've got a chance. You can't replace Trent in specific. You got to hope to replace him in the aggregate. Whether that happens via the fullback position or via some tactical changes and taking away some of the weaknesses they've had is probably the more likely path for me.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about both those fullback slots. We're also going to talk about striker, because that's a position that Liverpool have apparently been looking at, and Darwin Nunez seems to be on the chopping block. What other positions have you got here? Because I've brought a DM, because while Gravenberch had a really good season, there is still a defensive weakness, I think, at times in that midfield. The centre-backs, like you say, have had to play some pretty special football. And I just want a defensive profile in there as well.
So my presumption as to how they're going to approach this summer is they will sell as many players as they get good offers for in that sort of post-peak attack and out of their older player set. And so it's possible you could see like 3 of those center forwards, or not center forwards, but 3 of the forward line go. If somebody else behind the scenes like was agitating to leave, like you could see that as a reality as well. But the problem is we don't know. And the market right now is very choppy. And so if they have players that have clearly been briefing, their agents been briefing, hey, he's ready to go. He's ready to go to Spain. He's ready to go to here or there. Like if they can sell him, great. And you're looking at sort of 30 to 40 to 50 million for a bunch of these players. The other thing that Liverpool have done historically is when they have found a perfect profile, they will pay up for that profile. In the same way that Arsenal did with like Declan Rice, like they will pay a premium for the right types of players if they're available now and if they can find them. Otherwise, they just don't take any chances with overpays. So I find the forward market the most difficult for predicting what they will do, partly because we don't know what that budget will look like, and also partly because we don't know what's going to be available to them and if they have a perfect profile or not. Most of the guys that are on the list that I'm seeing, I'm not crazy excited about. And if you have to pay a premium for them, like you don't want it.
No, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how much they end up spending, because in some of these positions, I think you're going to have to economize. Like trying to do all this in one summer is kind of insane.
That's right.
But you know, if players become available who you really love, who you think are special, then maybe they do. Maybe they can find like another 50, 60 mil down the back of the sofa and go for them.
I got unusually excited about fullbacks from researching this. Partly because I haven't looked at the fullback market, but also partly because there's a guy on here that I was like, so last summer there were a few different times that I got really excited by players, and I was like, ooh, haven't noticed this before. Minta was one, and Minta would have been perfect for them as well. I think that they didn't want to do the expenditure because they couldn't get an outgoing done. Another guy was João Neves, who ended up over at PSG, and then the third one is I think Antonio Silva, who still ended up saying, I believe is at Benfica. He was a center back that I loved his style of play. So those were 3 that I scouted personally, and I was like, ooh, pretty tingly. I found the right back market really interesting. And I think that depending on what the prices look like, they're going to end up very happy and a little more robust, either defensively or they're going to end up with a player that has extreme versatility and isn't that expensive, which I'm quite intrigued by. So why don't we open up with right backs and see where we go?
Yeah, I think right back is the interesting slot, right? Like this is one of the couple of places where they absolutely have to do something. And there's also the question here of like, what balance do they want with their fullbacks? I think you're totally right. Like a lot of the media kind of focusing on how do you replace Trent, completely the wrong question. It should be, what do we want our fullbacks to play like in the long term? Do we want, you know, a kind of more of a passer model? Because actually Slot has had that at Liverpool and at Feyenoord. Do we want to have, you know, one of the guys who's kind of a hybrid centre-back? Do we want one flying fullback just as an option? I kind of looked for a passer type because it seems like that is something that he wants. Do you want to start off with yours though? Because you're excited, and I've got a right back I'm quite interested in.
Okay, so I think there are 2 that I'm super excited that are, and I think the right back market is deeper than the other. Not unsurprisingly, left back is always a challenge, but I think the right back market is deeper. So we've got Vanderson. So importantly, if you're just looking for any Vanderson, like there's lots of Vandersons. Like that's sure. And the miserable thing about the Portuguese and the Brazilian players in any sort of player database that you're looking at is like they get shortened to one name, and you're like, I need to know like where he was born. I need to know his birth date in order to find this one named dude out of like 1,000 one named dudes. So this is the Vanderson that's playing at Monaco. And when you look at his style of play, obviously Monaco, very high press, very aggressive. He fits that profile to a T. Physical, 1.80 centimeters tall. So pretty big fullback. We love a big fullback. Like, you know what they say about big fullbacks? Big fullback, big feet.
Good one.
Yeah. But we do love a big fullback, partly because they stop people from crushing you on these set pieces when you get a fullback mismatch, and partly because they're surprisingly a big, unexpected mismatch if they're pretty good in the air that you can use on set pieces as well, which I think has not been a strength of Liverpool this year under Slot, but they know that it's an important area for them to keep working on. So I like Vanderson a lot. His defensive output is very, very good if they want to play like a pressure style, if they want to play sort of a shutdown style. But his attacking output's pretty good too, and he's Brazilian, so like clearly he's waxed.
Wow. Is that what makes him so fast? Is that why he's so good at dribbling?
Yeah, there's no air resistance there.
There's nothing to hold on to. It just slips out of your grasp. Well, but he's been quite dribbly during his time at Monaco, though. That's always the thing that was the weird thing about Vanderson. Like, you do look at him and you think, okay, you're about to be 24. Like, defensively, you're going to be totally fine. You're a good passer, but there is something else here. You know, like he's quite an outlet for them on the right side. So maybe that there's an explosion there waiting to happen. Who knows?
I get dribbly around Brazilians as well. Yeah, the question that I have is what? The question I have is a little bit of sort of physical resilience. Like, is he going to be able to withstand the intensity that they're going to need? Because he hasn't played, full seasons the last couple of years in Monaco, whether that is injury issues or selection issues or whatever. I like him a lot. I don't know what the cost will be. That's pretty important. I also, like, after him, I have a discount option that I actually got really excited by. And I think he'll move somewhere big this summer, if he wants to.
A discount option. Okay, that's kind of interesting, because I think that Liverpool are going to have to take a couple of discount options. Do you want to go into your discount option? Or
well, do you have other ones? I'll come back to mine.
Yeah, so there's a guy called Arnau Martínez at Girona, who's quite an interesting player. Like, he's definitely in that passer mode. And I mean, Girona are a passy side, right? They've got Oriol Romeu, they've got Arthur Melo there, they've got Blint there, they've got Gutierrez, who actually is also quite an interesting player, potentially. But Arnau Martínez, he's 22, and he is a really good passer. He's heavily involved in play. The question is what you give up defensively. Now, it's not like terrible defensively. Like, he still does pretty well in the tackle, but he's like a low defensive action type guy. On the other hand, he's 22, he's in a proper league. He's still maturing. He's pretty decent in the air. He's also just under 6 foot, so about the same as Vanderson. And I mean, I assume that this is not their plan, but I don't really know whether they have ideas about using Quansah there or using Bradley there or any of that kind of stuff. So
I think
it doesn't block that.
I think they want Bradley, but they also know that they need depth in their fullback positions. I think they felt that this year. And I think also Bradley's like still a couple years away from taking that over. But if they could find a flexi player that they can play in a couple different positions, they'd be pretty excited by it. I think the one problem with the Girona player is that that's technically under City's umbrella.
Sure.
And you're not supposed to sort of block these things, but they might stick it out for a price premium that you wouldn't have elsewhere.
Yeah, that's true. I think he's a player I'd be looking at, though. I mean, and then last year, this is more something that I was thinking about in the past that I was right now. But I always wondered if when Trent was still there, it would have made sense for them to pick up someone like Sugawara, who ended up at Southampton this year, who also is this kind of passing player. And I think didn't humiliate himself in a Southampton side that has kind of humiliated itself quite a bit. There are players in there who would still interest me. He hasn't been terrible. He's only just about to turn 25. And if you do want to spend loads and loads of money in other positions, then that is a very, very bargain option you could take. I do not think it would placate Liverpool fans to replace Trent. On the other hand, you would say, well, do you remember when we bought this guy who plays at left back?
It's worked for us in the past many times.
Yeah, they're kind of the only team who can say that.
So my next option, and the one that I got very surprisingly excited by, is Óscar Mingueza. He's at Celta Vigo right now, but he's out of the Barcelona academy.
Yeah,
he actually spent a decent amount of time playing for the Barcelona first team back under like Ronald Koeman, and then moved on from that for reasons. I don't pay attention to reasons, but he's 1.84 meters tall. His deep progression in OBV numbers, so OBV being on ball value, kind of a ball metric thing where we actually take on the value of players moving the ball up the pitch and into the center areas of the pitch. And then there's some level of negativity, like when you make mistakes. Anyway, his deep progression and OBV numbers are nuts. And so he's an elite attacking fullback. He's also surprisingly fast, like 1.84 and has shown decent pace to keep up with like Real Madrid attackers, which is, fairly shocking. He's played both sides So he's played some left back, some right back. He can invert, and he's had some pretty good numbers when he was at Barcelona and quite young, when he was not sort of the center hub of attacking play, which sounds like another fullback that they're actually trying to replace. He's got 1 year left on his contract at Celta Vigo. Now, he's a little bit older than their age profile, but the thing that I find super exciting is that he's sort of right in peak. If you sign him up for a 5-year deal, you know you can play him in a few different positions across the pitch. And because of his pace, he could potentially be a midfielder for you in situations where you needed a midfielder that can also really open the game. He's got through balls in his bag of tricks as well. And then that set piece delivery is something that you're always looking for more players that can take set pieces that are good at it to help set up the corners and the free kicks. I would guess that he's like a 20 million euro type player. Like, it can't be that much with only 1 year left. Like, that's the high end of the price. If he were to go inside of Europe somewhere else, like Barcelona may have a buyback on him depending on how that looks, but like, can they ever execute any buybacks? Like, big question there. So I really like Mingueza. I think that he's going to go somewhere this summer. And I think that if teams in the Premier League are not trying to sort of agitate to get him, like, I would be very, very surprised.
Yeah, I really like him. He's I like him as that flexible option, like you're saying. It just feels like you want as many guys to solve as many problems at once as they can. And if their fullbacks can also solve some of their centre-back concerns, then I mean, that would be incredible work. And I'm sure that Liverpool are thinking about that this summer. I would love to see him make a move. It feels inevitable that he does. I suspect that Barcelona get a cut. I don't know whether they have a buyback, but I suspect they get a cut. But if he's got a year left, like, what can you do? He's going.
Yeah, you can't. And Celta will make deals because they always need to. Like, Spain,
exactly.
Spain isn't super rich, and like cash now is very valuable for Spanish clubs. Now, I'm going to let you pronounce the last name. I think on our right back list, used to be at Feyenoord, but sort of trapped in the Red Bull system here.
Lutsharel or something. I don't know.
Mozzarella
I don't speak
Geertruida.
Dutch, but Lutsharel. We need to get Nikos on this. But
Mozzarella Geertruida. That's where I'm at. Mozzarella Geertruida.
We talked a lot about him last summer, and then he went off to Leipzig and hasn't really done much of note since.
So Leipzig had a shit season. They tanked the value on a bunch of their players. We'll talk about another one that will end up being an attacker that everybody's like, meh. Lutsharel is... God, this is a disaster. First of all, Schlott knows him, loved him at Feyenoord, helped him win a title, does all the things you want him to do from an attacking perspective. Open question as to whether physically good enough in the Premier League. And I say that not because like I have huge doubts about it, because RB usually don't choose players that they think are physical mismatches at all, but just like that level of attacker in the Premier League or in the Spanish league right now, if you're on the wide spaces, like you're going to face just the best athletes in the world. And so like there is that little bit of question as to whether you're able to do that on the weekly. But yeah, he's got size, he's got versatility, huge deep progression numbers. The only issue is that when we're looking at sort of cheaper prices for players that we think are really good, unless they've fallen in love with him, which is possible because the head coach knows him as well, like you got to pry him out of the Red Bull system. And RB like always stick on numbers. So unless something weird is there, or they just want to move him on this year because they haven't been able to sell other players, like I think he might be at more of a price premium.
Mm-hmm. It'd be interesting to see. I mean, like it feels like they're up to things that I can't quite make sense of right now. You know, like the Xavi Simons thing is so confusing. If they make a big sale early in the summer, then maybe it's going to be harder to price some of these other guys out. But I guess it depends what the coaching situation is, you know, like what their plans are for him.
I feel like this year's a rebuild year for them. And so like, you know, they'll get whatever coach, but they usually make decisions outside of the coach because they do have kind of head coach changes pretty regularly. What they'll do is they'll sell the ones that they think they need to sell like at good prices. They'll hope the next coach recovers the ones whose prices crashed because they had such a bad season this year. And then they'll be able to extract more from future seasons.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'm pretty happy with those right back options. Like you're right. This is quite an interesting market for them. So the Trent departure doesn't happen at the worst time. Do you want to flip over to the other side of the defense? Because this is a zone where, like you say, it's been a weak slot for them all season. But it's possible that if they get in a quality player here, that they can still get some mileage out of Robertson as well. Like a well-rested Robertson can probably give you some good games a few times a season. But having to rely on this position has been a worry.
Absolutely. And I think that tactically they've had to cover for him a lot, and the center backs have had to do a lot of work, and the defensive midfielders have had to do a lot of work as well. And so they just know that like he just does not have the legs to keep up with that. Like, can they treat him as a long-term James Milner, play 16 90s a season in the league, and then show up for like some games where you can rely on him? He's smart, he does the things, but like physically he's always going to have question marks against the really good teams. That's what I'm seeing them sort of set up for. Now the left back market is so much harder because first of all, like left footers are like 15%. Like I think Academy has been training players to be more two-footed, more left-footed because they know they can get premiums out of them. But like it's a pretty small percentage of the player population that have elite left feet. And so, yeah, they're not going to be able to do as many things as the right-footed players are just because there are so few of them, and the best of them get snatched up and taken into the big teams over and over again. So if you're trying to replace somebody that, they did great business with Robbo, like now you're like, okay, what are we looking for in this profile? And then what is the price versus attributes and skill sets that we can kind of maximize in this window?
Mm-hmm. So, well, given the players that we were looking at for the right side, it makes sense that this left side might be a more athletic type, somebody who's going to get up and down the wing a little bit more. And they've been heavily linked to Kerkez. That seems to be the guy who they like. He's a big crosser. He's very young. He's played this season for a pretty interesting side, with a high level tactical manager. He's not like setting the world on fire with his defensive output, but like it's okay for a guy of his age. It would make a lot of sense to me if they did it. I'd be totally fine with them doing it.
I feel like they probably, so if this is me building the team, let me not like try and look at their tea leaves. If this is me building the team, I'm so excited about the right back options that I'm actually pretty happy to lock in on a left back that's great defensively.
Okay.
That's kind of my perspective on this, because like, yes, you need to have elite physical output, but like if we're comfortable with this, knowing that it's a harder profile to fit, or knowing that we might want to wait a window or two to find a better left back, like maybe we can go for somebody that ticks enough boxes right now, and then we can go for an elite player when they come available in a couple of years. Maybe we've scouted them ahead of time, or maybe we're just waiting for maturity to happen. That would be my guess. So Kerkez does not pop the stats. Now Robinson didn't either, but when I look at his stats profile, I'm like, yeah, he seems to be very physical. He's doing well. He's like Premier League ready. I get it. He's super young, so like he's got that going for him. But like when you look at his stats output, like usually you need, in order for Liverpool to pay a good chunk of money, they need both the scouting and the stats to align. And his stats are just like, they're like fine. So I think that they would be really cautious on that one if it had a big price, which it probably will, because Bournemouth know that they're going to sell Dean Huijsen this summer. And so they're going to have money to play with. If they wanted to keep him again, like he's got, he's young, he's got a long-term contract, probably not an issue, unless there's another release clause in that one too.
So, okay, we're going to come on to the left-back options then. But it just feels like my worry is that if you get a guy who's defensive but doesn't have much attacking output, it feels like the left winger is going to often have a lot to do. And I don't love... I mean, Luis Diaz is pretty great, but they're clearly shopping him around. That said, the only team who sounds remotely interested is Barcelona, and they don't have money.
Tsimikas has done fine, and he's been like, quite good on his defensive output, which is the other reason why I think that this is their lean, right? That's why I think that they might become, also because the right back options are so good, and that's the guy that plays behind Salah. Like, I feel like they want to continue to activate him and continue. And Cujo also has sort of been kind of in that role, somewhat like up front too. So if they can keep the kind of core right side elite attack going against other teams' weaknesses, which is left backs, that's probably something that they will intend to do. I'm not saying that you're necessarily wrong. I'm just saying, like, if we're looking at optimizing spend and what they can get right now, this is how I would view it. Just like, I don't think the market's super exciting. I don't know all the left backs in the world. Like, maybe they'll pull a rabbit out of a hat like they have done in the past. But yeah, they might just go for a good enough on this one.
Sure. And I mean, like, when I look at the attacking left backs who are potentially available anyway, they are guys who would have some roadblocks. So Gutierrez at Girona, or Morera, who's at Strasbourg. Like, these are guys who are maybe not owned, but owned by rivals. You don't really want to do it. The interesting name, and we actually have heard him linked to Liverpool, but an interesting name for me is Jorrel Hato. Like, he is a player that presumably everybody's going to be looking at. He's 19. He's played real minutes at centre back and real minutes at left back, and he's a young Ajax player. I mean, he's a fantastic passer. He's extremely technically capable. He's managed to retain a lot of his passing while his kind of build-up passing, while also upping his creative passing, having played left back this season. And he's just, yes, he's playing the Eredivisie, but he looks incredibly dominant as a teenager. He can't
19.
really do much more. So, you know, I look at him and I think, okay, this covers a lot of problems for me. You know, this guy can potentially be a long-term solution at left centre back, but he can play left back now. He's clearly intelligent. He's a good athlete as well. Great.
I think you're right. I think that Ajax will not look to sell that at all. Like, they view him like, so Ajax were in the shitter for the couple of years before this one.
Sure.
And it kind of tells you how bad some of the Dutch teams had it this year, because like Ajax should not have been able to rebuild that quickly. And they did. We actually quite liked their head coach and recommended him for some jobs like much lower down that he was not successful at. But I think part of that might have been sort of team systemic and not his issues. So I think that they've done pretty well at hanging on to their really good young players that are important. I think that he'll go for a premium, because you're right. Everybody looks at him as like, oh, this is a future star somewhere, that even beyond Ajax. But yes, I think the only issue is like, you know, one, is he established enough on the defensive side of the ball for the Premier League? Is
sure.
An interesting question. Mm-hmm. You can't just expect to slot him in right now. Like, I think he's a 2-year project. Like, you know, Lenny Yoro, like, it's kind of the same type of thing, but Yoro was playing in a more physical league. So like, yes, this is good, but you know, at age 21, 22, that's when you expect him to become like your starter there. Somebody that is a starter that is also on the list, and this one's a funny one because he's been rumored for ages too. So Antonee Robinson at one point was rumored for a move from Wigan to AC Milan. And that move actually got to the point of physicals. And basically they found some things in his physical that made them sort of concerned about his long-term durability, potentially there may or may not have been potential issues around some level of degeneracy or just things that like weren't clean in the physical that made them question the gap between Wigan and here, and then also not knowing how well he'd withstand the sort of battering of top tier football. He has been an ever present for Fulham. and you're like, wow, this dude just plays all the time in the Premier League. So it shows you that like different players and potential medical issues, it doesn't mean that it's the end of the world. Sometimes you roll the dice and you get lucky. Fulham have done that. Robinson's a very good all-rounder. He's also good in the air. He might not have the elite level passing that Liverpool are looking for, but the age profile is one where you could expect him to start a couple of years and then be replaced by someone better. And that might be what they're looking for. But some of the things that I had heard that might have been found in his physicals were same sort of things that Calafiori was flagged for and now seem to have been dogging, you know, him at Arsenal. And so sometimes it goes wrong and sometimes it doesn't, and different players are different, but it wasn't necessarily a wrong thing. I think that he's a very capable current profile that they could move forward. Now, the question again is always like, what's the cost? And Premier League players, inter-Premier League moves, like it's expensive all the time.
Yeah, at 28, he's 28, I think.
He'll be 28 next year, I think, or for the next season.
Okay, so getting him off Fulham, I just can't see it being worth the cost. But yeah, he would be very good for them right now. He'd be completely fine. You wouldn't have to worry about him at all. He'd plug right in. So, do you have a favored candidate here? Because I've got to say, like, yeah, it's not exciting.
I have one that I think is very interesting, and I have one that the rumors are starting to point to that might have some heat. So Rayan Aït-Nouri at Wolves has been there for ages. Last year, purely defensive, but they kind of view him as an important part of their resurgence this year. He's got a 1 year plus a 1 year club option. So like not necessarily a huge price, although it depends on if Wolves want to sell or not. This year, he was more involved in the attacking side, and you have no concerns about league adaptation. So if you needed somebody else that's a bit younger that could slot in, like he's definitely one. I find that one intriguing. I find that one like a potential likelihood, depending on what the price look like. Then you get the other side that I think is exciting, but more like the right-sided guys that we talked about, which I'm not sure they would go with. You've got Maxime de Kuiper at Club Brugge, who is very good in attack, and he's like a fantastic passer. His defensive side is like good enough, but he's such a good left back that you could play him as like inside left back that are in vogue until the season, and you could just expect him to like run that left side of the ball. Like his passing is so good, set pieces as well. So I found him to be a really interesting candidate. I also think that he will have a move this summer too, like to somewhere bigger.
Yeah, it does look like he's going to go this summer. I, like you, I've been impressed by his attacking ability, but defensively, I don't know. Actually, Alex Barker, of The Athletic, he wrote a thread on him recently, and he was scathing about De Kuiper's defensive abilities. But you don't get him in your team for that. I mean, the only thing is, obviously, you'd have Van Dijk, 1 year older, saying you're still covering for this left-sided fullback. But I don't know. Maybe they do get more of a kind of situational back three out of it. Like last year, they were in this unusual situation of not having a true DM and of having both fullbacks be defensively problematic. If one of those gets upgraded, if you get like Vanderson on the right, then suddenly things get a little bit easier for you, I guess.
That's right. It's all about maximizing profile and also maximizing versatility at the same time. So if you have more guys that can create in the attack, and you've got a pretty good defensive core that you've managed to maintain, like you managed to win more games by just scoring more goals. And those guys can also sit more often as well. So like, sometimes fullbacks look dumb because they're having to do all of the work, right? And we've seen this with Trent a lot. Like if Trent just has to defend, he's probably an average defender, like maybe slightly better in a top league. Not great, but because of the fact that like he powers everybody's attack and he makes everything run, like then you're like, okay, this guy's awesome at the stuff that he does. So you can balance this on one side or another. You also have the ability to just say, hey, our center backs, and if we have like a dedicated defensive midfielder that can't roam and he knows that he has to be on this side, maybe even playing two defensive midfielders to block things up. Like that's a way that you can still build out of the component parts and the skill sets that you're able to acquire. Now, if they get one of these elite right backs, they probably don't make that move. But other teams that have maybe an elite defensive right back that want more creativity on the left side, they could do it.
Okay. Right. Well, so should we look, seeing as we're kind of talking about this really as a unit, like trying to balance the number of guys you got across this back line, I guess we have to talk about Huijsen. He's been heavily linked with Liverpool. To me, it just feels like an area I understand really wanting him. He's had a great season. He's a big guy. He's played in this pressing system and seems to have great instincts. He's a huge set piece threat. There's loads to love here. But next season, your first choice centre backs are going to be Van Dijk and Konate, though Konate's got a year left on his deal. Is this an area where, do you just go for it because of the quality of the player? Or is this an area where you say, we can kind of cover this with a bunch of other guys and we'll have a look again in a year?
If you truly love him and you look at it from the perspective that says, if we buy this guy now at 50 million, he can play for the next decade for us at center back. Then that's an easy justification to make. Even if you don't need it this season, if you need it next season, you just do that deal because that same player in an open market is 80 million. And so that's why you would sort of like, hey, if we fund this now, we can take care of business in that way. Maybe even like you use some of the center forward money that and you just sort of rebuild that. And that's the thing that Liverpool will do. They will do it for the long term. They will make these choices not for next year, but for the next 5 years because they want to rebuild that core and that dynasty. And so I think that if they really love him, and I don't know what their insight looks like, they would do that deal now just to save them future money, but also knowing that they're building for long term.
Okay. Do you really love him? How good do you think he is? Because his reputation now is pretty much as the best young centre back in the game. People are talking him.
I would be comfortable at 50 million putting him in almost any team. Like I don't think Arsenal need him because they've got Saliba there, but and any other team, like I look at it and say, yeah, he's going to be somebody's, anchor center back at a Champions League level for the next 10 years. And so for me, like, yeah, I would do that deal in almost anywhere. I like him enough. I like the set pieces stuff. If you look at our review of him, I think when we were talking about Bournemouth last year and the transfer flow grades, thought that they got an awesome little deal. We had some data on him from his Juventus Primavera Academy times as well. And I was like, that looks like a really spicy little one. Didn't know he would be good this quick. I think that was the thing that you don't always expect. But sometimes players get their chance and they look amazing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, right. Well, we've got loads of other positions to cover, Ted. Like
this is the thing with Liverpool. They have needs. They won the title and they still have needs. Why don't we go to the one that is going to be the most expensive if they actually do it this summer?
Go for it. Okay.
Do you know which one that is?
I mean, well, there's the Salah heir. There's the striker. Like there's a bunch of places here. I don't know. Like,
I think the center midfielder, if they went for this player, would be the most expensive.
If they went for this player,
yeah.
Okay.
Come Wharton.
On
then. Adam Wharton, prying him out of Crystal Palace. People are like, oh yeah, he can't cost that much. Man, you'd be lucky if you got him for less than 80. And unless, again, there's a Crystal Palace clause like they built in for Olisa over last summer, like he looks like the heir apparent at the base of a midfield for England, for the next decade, as long as he's healthy. And people knew about him, but they did not expect him to slot in so easily at Palace. Everybody's excited by him. They're excited by his deep passing range. They're excited by the fact that, he seems like he can also ping balls like Cole Palmer does, but from further back. Mm-hmm. Can he be a sole midfielder at the base of a midfield? Probably not. Like, you need to make sure that you've got plenty of backup and plenty of cover. But if you were looking for the best young sort of central midfielder in England that can do defensive responsibilities, that's probably him. Now, the problem is, like, Crystal Palace have lots of players that they could sell this summer. They don't necessarily need to or want to. And so if you're trying to get him, it'll cost you.
Well, and the question is, who else is in for him? I mean, like, this is the thing with Wharton. If you go for him in the summer and Palace are open to selling and Man City or whoever, for some reason, doesn't take an interest, then you could try and close that deal. But I think that Liverpool will probably be wary of getting sucked into a situation like they did with Caicedo before, right? Where they just kind of ended up, it was clear to everyone they had all their eggs in this basket. And I mean, obviously it worked out for them. They won the title without him, but they clearly there got to a price that they were not comfortable with. And they're not going to let that mission, whatever it's called, mission slide kind of happen to them again.
No, I agree with you. I think the midfield is the area that they can potentially take longer on, waiting for like the right types of players. Last summer, I don't think they dodged bullets necessarily, but I think that they were worried and it worked out in their favor. This summer, they know more about what they've got, and they know that they definitely have other positions that are bigger profiles, potentially more important. But I'm not sure they get all their business done this summer. Like you just said, I think that they realize how much work is here, and knowing that the market is choppy now and potentially going to get better for them in future years, because like we're seeing all sorts of issues coming out of France. Nobody knows what's going on there. We're seeing the TV deals go down. Like, I think there'll actually be deflation across most of football over the next couple of years. And so Liverpool, if they know that, mean that, given they're going to have a long-term perspective, they don't need to spend right now.
Yeah, sure. Central midfield as well, unlike positions like left back, like central midfield, it does feel like there are, Wharton is a special guy, but there are lots of guys around who could be useful for Liverpool. This is totally a place where they could probably get some value. They didn't even really use someone like Curtis Jones that much this season. They could definitely get more out of him. I mentioned Nicolò Rovella, like in passing in our Man United episode. I really like him. He would cost under half of what Wharton would cost, and he's clearly on the market. We constantly hear about it. But he's 23, and this is like his 5th consecutive season as a starter in Serie A. Really good passer, defensive actions really good. Like he's a really nice player, and also has a little bit of what I would want to see for him to go to Liverpool. He has an awareness of when a through ball's on him, will just play it with no hesitation, which is really nice to see, I think, in that deep midfield role. if you want somebody else who can like run about and defend a bit, like I would, and is a good passer, I would love to see something like Pablo Barrios. That would be super fun.
When I watched Liverpool in stadium this year, much like Brentford, like you will see them try for balls that might immediately be on, knowing if they have a mismatch or if they feel like they have a mismatch on either side, like they'll just try and play those early balls all the time. And so what you're saying about that type of player able to see and play those very quickly, they'll look for that, and they'll also encourage that out of the players that they bring in. And that means that, you know, they need to have the players up front to be able to run onto those. Like extreme pace is something they're looking for, but also be able to beat a man on a dribble, and then to keep your head up to find Mo or to be found by Mo constantly.
Yeah, this is getting quite exciting. I mean, like, look, they as obviously they cannot do all this because I think we're probably up to about 250 million already. But I'm really intrigued to see what they do. It's like this is as we've talked about, this is one of the best buying clubs in the game going into the market with like a considerable rebuild to do. That's going to be super fun to talk about for us in the summer.
So nerdy, though. People will just be like, just show me the strikers. Why are we spending so much money on these guys that are not strikers? Oh, my God.
Yeah, well, I guess we should get to the strikers because they've been linked to a few. They've been linked to Alexander Isak. He's good. I don't think he's available.
Not available. They would need to be bought by a Saudi club to bring on like a lot of oil money in order to afford him. I think Newcastle are going to make the Champions League very likely, and so they're not interested in selling. But if they hadn't, like, it might have been a thing where they would let him go for, you know, some amount of money. I think the right price was under 100, but Newcastle fans would never say that. So you can argue about what the actual price is in a market economy. One of the 5 best strikers in the world right now, sure, but how much longer is he going to maintain that? Open question.
Okay. Well, yeah. Okay. If Isak is off the table, who else have they been linked to? They've been linked to Ugo Ekitike. There's Šeško, who is kind of like the next guy on the list. They seem to have escaped the Gyokeres agent, you know, mailer that has been sent out to everybody on Earth, but I'm sure that it's coming. So I don't know. Are there any of these that are intriguing you? Like Šeško's an interesting player. He can really gallop. He's pretty two-footed. He can dribble. He scored a hilarious goal against Bayern at the weekend. But the numbers are down this season. On the other hand, they are down in a Leipzig that, as you said before, was just cratering out at one stage this season. Got really nice power generation. On the other hand, he does shoot from basically anywhere. He'd be a less chaotic Darwin in some ways.
I think so. Size is very big, so that's another sort of perk. But he's sort of big in the leaner way as opposed to big in the big way. So I think there's a couple different takes on this. One, from the RB perspective, they'll be regretting not selling him last summer. Like, I know that they probably added another 20 million to his release clause that allegedly is active right now. It's supposedly there for 80 million euros. But the briefing that went out to friendly German journalists was that they're aware that they might need to settle for less. That's basically where they're at. And so when I look at it, you see a player whose value should have increased, whose output should have increased this season as he's a year older, has gone down. Like, that's very bad for you. And you can't reliably argue, unless there are a bunch of teams in, that this player is now a slam dunk that should go into your forward line. Like, Arsenal were super hot on him. He's been briefed a bunch of different times. Liverpool were there. Like, everybody knows about him. So he's not like a surprise. And they want to get Premier League money out of it because they know that it's basically double what they can get elsewhere, if not more so. The problem is just like, is he now a 40 million pound player as opposed to what he was before? Possibly, because somebody's going to have to take the risk that he doesn't continue to mature and that he's merely league average and going to be that way going forward. That's a significant risk. And these teams, again, are quite aware of it. So I think RB would definitely like to sell him this summer. I think that they usually have a conveyor belt of talent that they need to find space for. Nothing about this season says that he's close to being good enough in terms of output for what these teams were expecting. They would have taken him on now and then taken a slightly disappointing season in their own team after they paid for it, because they're like, oh yeah, we expect him to mature into something else. Now that they've seen RB be a mess this past year and Šeško really suffer because of it, you're like, I don't know. And that's the type of calculus that these teams will do because they need to be really careful about taking on these big burdens and having it bust.
Yeah. So he's about to turn 22. His, like you say, his expected goal and assist numbers have gone down from about 0.5 per 90 to now about 0.4. He's also just never been a big shot guy. Like, that's been my other thing about him.
Manchester United leading the line and teaching other people lessons.
Yeah, it's just like I just look at him and I think 2 to 2.5 shots a game just doesn't thrill me. I also guess that we don't know exactly like Slot's feelings on Darwin, except that he doesn't like love him. But he doesn't like Šeško doesn't seem like so totally different. You know, like I don't look at him and see that guy who really brings other people into play or is like much more reliable on the ball. I don't really see what he's upgrading if you bring Šeško in. It seems like you're just taking another gamble on this kind of guy. And it's a guy who might be worth taking a gamble on, but I'd rather just keep Darwin, I think. So I'd be looking for a totally different profile. So when I was looking at this, I was kind of looking at people like Gonçalo Ramos, who is at PSG and PSG are clearly not convinced about. It's hard to gauge because he's on PSG, but he has been a huge shot guy historically. He's at 4.5 shots a game this season. You know, he's at like 1.25 expected goals and assists per 90. He's not even 24 yet, but his numbers were also very good last year, and they're very good in Portugal too. Also big, bit more culture than Darwin. He's a good player who I think PSG would be happy to sell.
There were two Germans last year that were rumored. Like one was an in Germany rumor, the other one was obviously Šeško. The in Germany rumor was one that I was excited by, and he was actually a little bit linked to Chelsea. He ended up going to Dortmund. And when I look at what you're talking about, the type of player that I thought he was a year early for the Premier League, I was like, you'll have to put him in the gym for a year. But Maximilian Bayer was one that I was like pretty interested, because I think really elite pressure numbers, like he'll work his socks off, but then his passing elements were also pretty exciting to me as well. And so if you're going to have lower shot generation, you need to have the ability to really bring in people from the front. And that was something that I was seeing, happen pretty regularly on his end. The PSG players are so hard to figure out. Like you're playing,
yeah, they are.
It's the same way that like young Bayern players were in previous years, the same way that young City players were in previous years. If you're part of a super team that has this insanely elite attack, especially compared to the rest of your league, and you take them out of that, like Matthijs Tel is when we're like, what do you take out of his journey to Spurs? Like, I don't know. I don't think that anybody's super excited about taking these really young players and tossing them into your average or your weird Premier League teams. And so you've got to be cautious. And anytime you're being cautious, like that then I don't want to pay a price premium on it. You're not wrong, though. He could be awesome. The guy that went to Juve on loan,
Colomani.
Yeah, so Mbuemo is only on loan. I don't think there's a buy mandatory clause inside of it. So he's coming back, and like they have too many players essentially, and they'll need to sell somebody. So maybe you're getting a decent price out of it.
But that's the thing. I don't really look at the striker market and see the player who I think is like the dream for Liverpool. I think there are lots of interesting players around, but apart from Isak, who you're not getting, everybody on the market has some drawback. I think like maybe you go and look at someone like Retegui and you're like, well, Retegui, yes, he's playing for Atalanta and yes, they juice numbers, but we're Liverpool and he can clearly create and score in a good team. So we can do that. And he can run the channels as well. He receives a lot of balls out wide. Like this might make sense. I don't know, but it's still, you still have the question of he's kind of got good this year.
We're in a weird, I'll say weird for recent times era in striker space, a little bit like the Germans were, in that I feel like there are very few completely full-featured strikers around.
Yes.
And then in the past, we had this era where there were more so. Some of whom were outside forwards that were moved in, like a Robin van Persie, able to create for his teammates, like wicked creative numbers, but also then became like, leading Premier League goal scorer multiple times. Lewandowski is the guy that most recently, his creative numbers in the prime of his career were exceptional. Like he was able to create tons for teammates. I feel like we're not seeing a lot of players like that. And some teams are looking at outside forwards like Ronaldo was, where he got moved up more, and saying, can we find players and shunt them across to make them be more adaptive, and put them in the central role. It might also be that the center backs are such good athletes right now that it's harder for players to be able to do that, or the systems are different in that they're not allowing the players to be as creative as they used to be. So I'm just noticing that as a profile that when you just mentioned they're looking for that doesn't really seem to exist in world football. And so that's another situation where you have to take some risks about it. Ekitike is one that people are definitely excited by in the scouting community. Just again, like not a long set of stats and many years that he's done this for. So like, are you getting him at the right time, or are you getting him at a blip? Marmoush was probably the most fully ready-made guy, but he also went wide to in and then continued to perform in as part of a 2. So these are all questions that Liverpool are going to struggle with, and anybody looking for a true center forward this summer is going to struggle with. Even Arsenal, where you saw like Kai Havertz sort of fail, and they brought him in partly because they knew of his flexibility. Yeah, again, a creative player that you're sort of putting up top, but isn't like the best striker in the world. You just appreciate the fact that he can do multiple jobs.
And you wonder now, like, there's obviously it's somewhat agent driven, but it does feel like last summer people were talking about Gyokeres and Osimhen, and then they spent like 9 months talking about slightly more recherche, like interesting options. And now we're coming back to the transfer window, and suddenly everyone's like, maybe we just do Gyokeres or Osimhen, because at least these are guys who like hit ball hard, score goal. They might not be perfect for us, but they're probably going to do what we expect them to do. Whereas Ekitike, is he a bit too slight? Like, can he be as effective if he doesn't have space in the open field? There's, there are other people like, Bayer I liked, or Nick Woltemade, who went off to Stuttgart, who's kind of played wide as well, but it's his first season putting up numbers that you take seriously. So there's nobody really there who just like screams by me.
Pavlidis would have been cheapish last year, and now he's going to be expensive. I think the other thing to take away from this market is that like almost nobody's super happy with their center forwards at the moment, and that's just a lull in the position and the quality of the position, and also possibly a nod to the quality of the defenses that they're playing against. Like,
yeah, definitely.
Tactically, football's gotten a lot better, and athletically, football's gotten a lot better than it used to be.
Sure. Well, I mean, look, I think we've covered a lot of the major positions here. Are there any other bonus ones that you want to do?
So I feel like we can't leave the people without talking about a Salah understudy at the very least, because we know that he's in his last era. We know that he was really, really good this year. He hopefully will maintain that for another year or two. But they're also concerned about the fact that he might fall off, and that they're going to need, and also they need to maintain his minutes. Like, that's a challenge. Anytime an AFCON comes through, you know that he's going to be playing in that. So they need to do something.
Okay. But what is something? I mean, like, this is the problem. It's such a difficult position to recruit for. And like, the Mo Salah understudy needs to be somebody who looks good enough that they could potentially take that role one day, but is not so good that you're wasting them by having them just sit on the bench now. Like, this seems to me like an almost impossible task. Like, but there are players around, I guess. Like, there's the Mbuemo thing that has persisted all season. I really don't like this at all.
I think as a backup, he's probably fine.
Sure.
For Liverpool, I think for a team that's kind of Europa League type tier, like, you're pretty happy-ish about him, because the style that he plays is really interesting. Like, and for teams that want to be able to copy this, especially in Europe, if you're in knockout competitions, like Brentford have kind of played that style. So he's used to playing very fast on transition. You know that. He does hit. He's an elite ball striker. He hits the shit out of a ball and has done really well sort of creating goals off of that. Obviously overperforming because of some levels, but maybe he can continue to overperform throughout the course of the coming years. He's not elite, though. I think that's the thing that everybody is a little bit aware of, which is why he hasn't moved. Like, both he and Wissa are very good players. I think Wissa is probably a little more well-rounded out of the Brentford players, but it's also time for them to move on and play for somebody else and perform really well. Whether that'll happen this summer, open question. Good enough as a backup, fine. Good enough to be a Salah replacement in the future, absolutely not.
Yeah, well, that's my take, basically. And it just felt like they were going to have to pay like a ton of money to do it. I guess that Liverpool, it made more sense than when he was linked to like Arsenal, because Liverpool do at least manage to get their wingers in the open field running a bit more, and that is a place where we know he can be effective. But maybe there's something else as well. Maybe there's something creative. Like, Chelsea are probably going to have to make some sales. Maybe Chelsea let you have Madueke for a reasonable fee. I really like him. I think he's a good athlete. I think he's got pretty broad skill set. I don't know how good he will be, but I know that he's good enough to be useful now. That's kind of fine to me. But if I wanted to find somebody who could maybe take this role one day, who could be elite one day, I truly don't know where I would start. It's difficult.
I think the two players last summer that moved that Liverpool would have happily taken would have been like Michael Olise, who had more versatility and you could move him in both spaces. And then Nkuba Mente, who we flagged as like, this is definitely the most exciting player in this type of position, young player that, wouldn't need all of the minutes right away. So sometimes you have the sales window that happens and it's gone, both for finding players or like, Red Bull or RB had last year, where like they had a premium on a player, they were trying to extract more, they didn't sell him, they thought he would sell on, and now they've sort of lowered the value. Darwin has that element too. I think there are two interesting names that, beyond the Mbuemo ones. One is a Premier League player at the moment, and the other one, we go back to Monaco because Monaco seems to have lots of young, fascinating, interesting players.
They do.
So Tyler Dibbling is rumored as a move. The Southampton Brain Trust put a 100 million on as like to try and move the Overton window, which is the same fucking thing that Napoli did last year. Like if you have that, you're not selling this player. Fine, you don't want to sell him. Okay, I don't care. But the question is like, what is the right price for Tyler Dibbling, given that his output numbers are not the most exciting, but his age combined with his dribbling numbers and ability are crazy exciting.
Mm-hmm. And his size as well. I mean, like, just seeing him go up against Premier League fullbacks and be capable of knocking them over is intriguing to me. Plus, there have been some moments where you look at the passing and you think, oh, okay, there's something happening here. But he would be insanely raw, like a really raw player for Liverpool to pick up, which I'm fine with. And if they can like pay for something like this by selling guys around the squad, like maybe they sell Harvey Elliott finally, things like that, fine with it, totally fine with it. I'm more excited about the Monaco option, I've got to say, because I think the player you're going to bring up is a player that I love. And he, along with Elias Ben-Seguir, like there are really exciting youngsters at Monaco, though this player is closer to peak age.
Yeah, so Maghnes Akliouche. I mean, you're going to pronounce it better. I quite like his hair, so that's a nice.
He's interesting, right? He's quite evenly split between creating and goal scoring, but he also does a load of the build-up stuff that I think sometimes people just forget about with Salah. Like he's done less of it this year, but Salah, historically, they'd say, well, he scores a lot of goals, and you're like, Salah is the guy who drives them up the pitch, kind of like Saka. Like Saka is a good comparison there, in that he's this huge progressive carry machine, and the repeat intensity is astonishing.
The reason why they are progressive carry machines is because defenders are so afraid to get close to them and get embarrassed, because the outcome of that is very, very bad.
Yeah.
And so when you have those types of players that you also know that they can create and score, but they can beat you on the dribble. I think the thing about Salah is that he's just crazy fast. And if you're looking for players that can run onto the ball into space, you do need at least one on the either side that is crazy fast. The thing that gets lost about Salah is like he's also just incredibly well built. He has this great low center of gravity. Like you can't knock him off of anything. And in fact, like if he's competing with you, you and I would probably have this same sort of thing. If we ever played basketball together, like I'm way taller than you. But because I'm so long versus you, and you're such a low center of gravity and built like, a piece of granite that's shaped as a dwarf, like you're able to move my hips back and forth. Same thing Sergio Aguero used to do as well. Like, and the taller, longer players that we see these days, like when you have that lower center of gravity, you have calves that are like this and quads that are like that. Like you can still just move those guys out. Salah does not look like he's built in the way that he plays, but the pace and the gravity and everything else about it. This player is not that same, but he can move the ball very well. And he does a lot of the build-up stuff. And so the question is a little bit around physicality. Is he ready now? Does he have much left to go? But if you're looking for somebody that you could find in maybe the 30 to 40 million that could come in and definitely be a backup and possibly take on that role for the long term, yeah, I'm interested.
Yeah, I mean, Akliouche is one of those few players who pops for carrying, for passing as an outlet, who's also got very good expected goal and assist numbers at the end of it. Like he just looks like he can do a bit of everything. The question is how much of this is maybe being like a load of these numbers pop this season in this like high press hooter kind of situation. So you don't really know, I suppose, what he looks like having to build up against a sitting defense in the Premier League. But he definitely looks like a really good player. I think somebody should buy him. He's been a starter there for a couple of years now.
I think Liverpool also have comfort in buying from that type of system. Like they've done it a few times. Like they know the Red Bull system inside and out. Hooter is a guy that like they've taken talent from or seen talent come out of him, and so like there is comfort level in the transition adaptation. Worked his socks off. Also like played a ton of minutes in that system, which not everybody can do. So I think that that's a pretty good sign too. I think he probably will be one to move. I think that he is polished enough that teams can happily sort of slot him into another Champions League team. So yeah, of the list of ones that we either thought were really interesting, Kim did a lot of research on this, so thanks to Kim as well. He's the most excited I am about the backups. I just think, yeah, everybody knows you have a huge challenge in replacing Mo and finding the right profile, and they at least have 1 or 2 more years in order to try and find it.
Yeah, it just feels like one of those situations where like get a left winger who can maybe also play right wing or something like that. Like maybe do more of a compromise. Like somebody, I'm not saying they should do this, but somebody like Rodrigo is on the market. That would be kind of interesting. Nico Williams supposedly on the market. That would be kind of interesting. Like there's a lot that could be done here. Not a fan.
I have the same concerns about Williams as I do about Šeško, but I think Williams is actually much more comfortable in not moving. His brother's there, and they're going to be legends if they stay. And Bilbao's a pretty great place to be a legend. So maybe he just sees his career there and is like, "Yep, I don't care if anybody else gives a shit about what I'm doing. I'm very happy here, and I'm happy playing for Spain. So stay that way."
Well, and he's getting paid super club money at his hometown club. Like it works out for him. Okay, well, I think we've given quite a lot of options there, but we'd be definitely interested to hear what your options are in the comments below. If you are a Liverpool fan, you're very angry about suggestions that we've made, then tell us why we're wrong. We might take it seriously if you can make the argument. We're really enjoying doing these. I think these are super fun. And a lot of these players, we're trying not to just like pluck guys out of thin air who are never going to move. Like most of these guys are legitimate candidates for big moves this summer, and Liverpool are definitely going to be taking the credit card out. So, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. We will catch you next week. I don't know what our next one is. Is it Tottenham?
Spurs.
Oh, Jesus. That's a long weekend for us. Okay, well, that's a lot of work, but we're going to bring it to you. We really do appreciate your support, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye. Did you have a chance to look at any of the Met Gala stuff last night?
You talked to me?
Yeah, of course. Who else would I fucking talk to?
I don't know. Like Rishi might be a fashion dork. I don't know. Yeah.
One of these things are factual. The other one is hypothetical. So.
I've seen a little bit. Yeah. But it does tend to be like the people you expect to be good are good. You know, you're like Coleman Domingo is gonna be good like every time. Zendaya is gonna be good every time.
Zendaya is always good. Zendaya is like always outrageous.
Janelle Monáe is always good.
Yeah, Monet's like one of my favorite people in the world. And in fact, like you always notice when she's in the background too. So you're like looking at the photos, like, oh, there's Monet. She's
just a star quality though. You know, like there's something in Janelle Monáe. Like she just needs to act more, in my opinion.
Oh, I totally agree. I think that's absolutely true.
Did you see
Lakeith?
Sorry,
I love Lakeith Stanfield's one. I think that's
I haven't seen that.
Fabulous look.
I do love Lakeith.
Both he and Brian Tyree Harris threw some excellent looks up there. I'm also reminded every time that this appears that like I despise basically all of the Kardashian Jenners. Like I just like those people. I can't believe they still exist.
So I also have this issue. So oh shit, man, he looks fucking good as hell.
Yeah, he's fire, isn't he?
Oh my god, this is good. Oh, but he's an incredibly cool guy. Oh my god. I get how it's on theme, but I don't really love the Damson Idris like flared suit. I just can't do it. Yeah, I'm not a big red suit.
For those of you who are unaware, like the Met Gala is this huge fashion party effectively that's thrown every year, and it always has a theme about it. This year I think was black tailoring. I don't have the exact
It was black dandies.
There we go. Which, you know, some people respond to the theme and other people do not. Like Brosnahan's there. Brosnahan's always beautiful. She's always very fashionable. She has nothing to do with the theme. Some people are like, well, I'm not going to fit into this anyway. And you're also reminded of like a ton of people that you've never seen before, including some NFL stars. Kaepernick's here, which I think was pretty interesting.
That's interesting.
Yeah. If you go to the Vogue website, there's like 304 photos on there of like everybody. The one I wanted to ask you about, though, did you see Andre 3000's fit?
Yes, he looks amazing.
Amazing.
It's
so amazing.
But okay. In my opinion, though, Andre 3000 is the coolest person who's ever lived. Like, and maybe the most talented person, like one of the most talented people who's ever lived. Like he looks so good. He looks so good. Like even with the piano, but if you take the piano off, I'm like, this is just a hard look. This is just a super hard look.
I just didn't expect that he would be dressed up as Harry Kane playing for England.
Oh, it's good. It's good. Oh, fuck. He's honestly, like, the fact that Andre 3000 now, like went from being, he's always been one of my, like, in my top 5, like when I think of my top 5 rappers, like it was always a top 2, and my top 2 are him and MF Doom. And but the fact that he just at a certain point just said, all I do now is walk around in the background of people's videos playing my Peruvian double flute. Like, fuck yeah. What a guy. Yeah, I think his look is amazing. And Coco Jones was really good. Sydney Sweeney was shockingly good.
She was.
I'm normally a bit of a Sydney Sweeney skeptic. But she looks great. And Jeremy O'Harris doing Beau Brummel as well is kind of fun.
So there's also these people that are going to be terribly dressed every time. Like, I don't think Natasha Lyonne has been dressed well outside of one time in her life, but she's still great to watch on television. And you're just like, some people's fashion I absolutely hate, and that's like generally the case. But yeah, you and I are very much in the same boat here, which I think is a positive and a negative. So for those of you who watch Man Down, and expecting us to disagree heavily on men's fashion there, like, we'll find out, but we lean towards the same. Also, I thought Tyler was exceptionally hot, and FK Twigs was not, and Twigs is very hit and miss in this as well. But yeah, like our fashion episode or the start of like talking about men's fashion in Man Down will come up in the coming weeks.
Let's see Tyler.
This week, I think we have age gaps, don't we? Okay. Which is going to get me into trouble.
Okay. Look, I'm on board with this, Tyler. Look, this is great. Yeah, she looks like she looks like a grown up. I feel like Tyler for a long time just looked kind of like 17 to me. But here she looks. This is very Monroe-y. That's kind of fun. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay, I can get on board with that. What you were saying before, okay, about the Kardashians. So, sure, I get it. My issue is that, like, I shouldn't see at an event of this stature and at the Oscars, I shouldn't see fucking YouTubers there. I shouldn't see TikTokers. We might as well be there, Ted. Like, that's kind of how I feel. When they're like, oh, Emma Chamberlain's here. For years, every time I see Emma Chamberlain, I'm like, who the fuck is Emma Chamberlain? Who is she? Mm-hmm. What does she do? I'm not interested in her. Like, get her off my screen. She's got a face for YouTube. And I say that as someone who's on YouTube. Like, get her out of here. She's not a real person. I just want real, like, very talented people there. I want people from fashion. I want people from music. I want people from the arts generally. The arts do not include TikTok. That is my view.
Okay. So Mr. Beast is, like, not in your pantheon of people you should see at the Met.
I think Mr. Beast, he belongs, like when they build a prison planet, in like a science fiction film. Like, Mr. Beast should be cracking rocks on Mars, in my opinion. I think Mr. Beast is truly like an evil object. And we should bury him in the center of the earth.
So you're not feeding your kids Beastables?
I'm not the moldy Beastables? No, they don't eat moldy Beastables. Yeah. Though probably my older daughter would actually be really into it, depressingly enough.
One of the things I do notice about like the Met and these fashion things, and actually like the entertainment industry as a whole, is there are a lot of short kings there.
Sure.
Like you see like the proportionality of guys, and you're like, you got to be like 5'7", 5'8" at most. And for those of you who who are hoping to sort of graduate into your beautiful selves. Short kings are beautiful as well, and they're all over these photo pages. So appreciate it. Just work on yourself, get fit, and then get some fashion, baby.
Big heads, short bodies. That's the recipe. That's why it's funny when you get actors alongside models, because models are like really long bodies, tiny heads.
Yes.
And then actors are enormous heads, tiny bodies. So you end up with like these little bobble heads, like when you've got
Jeremy Allen White.
Or to my mind,
perfect.
Maybe the hottest man alive, Oscar Isaac. You have him alongside like Ducky or something, and it's like emissaries of two different species like meeting for the first time.
Yeah, Cara Delevingne is as well. Like she just appears, and you're like, oh, that's a tall, thin person. Then like next to an actual hot person. I don't find her particularly hot or interesting, but she just keeps appearing in stuff. And you're like, stop casting her.
Yeah, she does not interest me.
But Emma Chamberlain, you're big on.
It's just like, who are you? Who are you, hun? Like, get out of here. I don't really mind it when it's Amelia de Moldenberg. Like, I don't mind her. I think that she is good at developing a rapport with people. Her shtick is not quite for me, but I get it. I like her, and I think credit to her. She has an interest in fashion and the arts. It's fine with me.
I really struggled with her shtick, but I learned to appreciate it at times.
Sure.
And there are times that she just works and somebody else works with her, and so like all the Andrew Garfield stuff is just really fun.
But I think Andrew Garfield has sexual chemistry with every single person he meets, which seems to help, right? You put him in a room with just like I don't know, a pile of bricks, and by the end of it, like you'd probably have really good content coming out of it.
Yeah, bricks are into him. I got it. Yeah. Okay, so we have a podcast we have to record that we're going to rebuild the champs.